I think she's been an exceptional Australian of the Year because she's brought to our attention an issue that we are uncomfortable about, that we don't like to face and discuss.
So, she's been an exceptional Australian of the Year. Sorry if the title of the video fooled you. This is in regards to Australia. Australia does a Australian of the Year. They only do one every year, and that person then, of course, is either female or male. In this case, it happens to be a young woman who isn't very old, and those of you who are my Australian fans watching this will know who I'm talking about, and that is, of course, Grace Tame. And what is going on here with Grace Tame? I was asked by one of my fans to do a video on Grace Tame, and my research shows it's murky, it's muddy, but I'll do what I can to kind of show you what is really going on in this particular situation. And it's, if I'm right, it's ugly. It's really ugly. So let's take a look at this broadcast Australian story, which is funded by Australian taxpayers, on Grace Tame.
I don't claim to have all the answers. I know I'm going to make mistakes.
How many talks do you reckon I've done this year?
Maybe about 50.
I swear there'd be more than that.
Usually recipients of Australian of the Year are much older than I am.
Maybe that says something about you receiving Australian of the Year. Did you maybe do something untoward to get this nomination?
They have more experience and they've got some knowledge of how to navigate, a speaking circuit.
The answer is probably not a sustainable amount. I can't be operating at this pace for the rest of my life.
If we can get through this year, we can get through anything.
Max and I were flying by the seat of our pants. We still are.
People flock to her, people are drawn to her because of the way that she speaks, the way that she conveys her message.
That is worrying, that people flock to her, people are drawn to her. There's a certain type of person in the world that garner a lot of attention from other human beings. Sometimes those are good people that do that, but oftentimes they are psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, things of that nature. So, is she a real charmer who has good intentions, or is she one of these nefarious people who doesn't have empathy?
So the ABC is filming this morning. If you don't want to be filmed, put your hand up.
I mean, this whole thing is about her and her being filmed. So she's making this cute little joke here about how she doesn't want to be filmed. I don't want to be on TV. See how charming that is. Look at me. I'm the one who doesn't want to be filmed. That's me. Haha. I do the same kind of sarcasm. You don't hear it in my videos. I don't know why, but I can't really be that funny when I'm talking to myself. Just imagining I'm talking to all you out there I know. Yeah, my sarcasm doesn't come through. Point being.
She's very polished and she's very articulate and she's very intelligent, but she's still just a 26-year-old who's doing all the things that 26-year-olds do and who's processing years of trauma.
Remember that, what she just said there. Years of trauma.
I lost my virginity to a pedophile. I was 15. I spent the next 6 months being raped by him nearly every day at school on the floor of his office.
We have to question that part because that's not true. So she said, the previous speaker said, hey, she's processing years of trauma, and then she says it was 6 months. So which one was it? Was it 6 months or was it years? I know what it's like to have processed years of trauma. Grace Tame does not. We can take a look here at the actual court report, and we can see that she's lying because it says right here, for example, on November 10th, you booked a room at a city hotel and arranged to meet the complainant being Grace Tame, at a hotel after school. The complainant told her parents she was going to yoga. You arranged to pick her up in, Mole Street, where you provided her with a hooded jacket, which you asked her to put on to avoid being recognized. At the hotel, you had vaginal intercourse with her on 2 occasions. Afterwards, you dropped her near her yoga class so she could be collected. The jacket was worn on other occasions by the complainant when she was in the car with you. And another incident here. Sexual intercourse often occurred at the school before or after school, or on weekends in places such as your office during the month of October. You met the complainant at a house in West Hobart where you had intercourse with her. A friend had given you a key to his house while he was in hospital. So for the whole month of October, and there's this other time at least where there was a hotel involved. And Grace Tame says every day for 6 months. So that's, 180, at least 150 times, right? Mr. Bester, who is accused of this crime, says it was only 20 to 30 occasions. Now, I've heard other people saying that this 20 to 30 number has been touted by Grace Tame. I couldn't find anything where she was claiming it was 20 to 30 times. I've only ever seen her say it was almost every day for 6 months. So there's a discrepancy there. I'm going to side more with Mr. It's probably more than 20 or 30 times, probably more like 40 or 50 times. But I'm going to side with Mr. Bester in this case because she is processing this through her emotions more so than I think he would be. Mr. Bester was her teacher, and he took advantage of her when she was 15. Let's get back to the video and see what it has to say.
Grace Tame is a very outspoken Australian of the Year, and she's disturbed some people because of her direct criticisms. But she has started and kept going a national conversation that we probably needed to have.
Child sexual abuse and cultures that enable it still exist.
Our collective voices can make a difference.
So what is going on in Australia that you needed to have this conversation? I mean, isn't this illegal? It is illegal because Mr. Bester was arrested and imprisoned for this crime. What is the big conversation you need to have here? I don't understand.
My job is to hear and stand with the oppressed. And if I have a platform...
What is with the crazy eyes here? This freaks me out. Look at that look on her face. She is like possessed or something during this little conversation here she's having.
that allows me to do that, you bet your ass I'm going to use it.
Let's make some noise, Australia!
So did you two bring your babies?
No. Yeah, and
It means a lot having Grace home now.
it's a lovely idea.
We're a close-knit family.
You're a close-knit family. Really? Then how come she left for years to go live in the United States? That's what they were referring to, her being home. Because she was living in the United States. Not only that, if you're a close-knit family, how is it that this girl gets into a situation where she's being taken advantage of by a much older man when she's a teenager? How is it that this girl begins to self-harm if you're so close-knit? How is it that this girl develops anorexia? How is it that she gets into illegal drugs if you're so close? That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know. I didn't come from a close family. My family was freaking at each other's throats all the time. So explain to me how this works. If you come from a close-knit family, are you tempted to use illegal drugs? Are you tempted to self-harm? Are you tempted to go off and have illegal affairs? Oh, I mean, obviously Grace wasn't. We can't blame her because she was a child. So the law says that she was the victim, not the perpetrator. But that's a whole other ball of wax I don't want to get into. I just want to focus on the weird things that I see in this video, more or less. Let's go ahead and see what else they have to say.
And it's wonderful to spend time together, especially after the relationship between Grace and her little brother Oscar was so disrupted when the abuse happened and Grace moved overseas. Grace was living in the United States when she was diagnosed with high-functioning autism. And that then helped us to understand some of the things that we had just accepted and maybe occasionally struggled along with, but didn't understand.
Now, a moment ago, she said she wanted to give a voice to the oppressed.
My job is to hear and stand with the oppressed.
How oppressed is she that they can afford this boat? How oppressed are they that they can afford to send her to the United States to go to school? She went to Santa Barbara City College here not that long ago. I don't live that far from Santa Barbara. I've been to Santa Barbara. I used to go there all of the time. I used to go there 2 and 3 times a week. Now, fortunately, it was before Grace Tame came to the United States. I don't have any interaction with her, but it's crazy that this woman here who has a national platform in Australia is talking about giving a voice to the oppressed, as if she's one of them.
The autism diagnosis was certainly a vital piece of the puzzle, which helped bring a little bit more clarity to the picture. But it's also very confronting. You know, I already felt like there was something wrong with me.
Grace doesn't necessarily read social cues, but I think it's what contributes to Grace's fierce honesty. She can only tell the truth as she sees it, and she can be very blunt with the truth. It might upset some people, but I think perhaps the truth is what we need to hear.
Yeah, that's why she was lying to you, telling you she's going to yoga class, going to the movies with her cousin, when she was in fact meeting her adult lover. She obviously can be very charming. Everybody thinks she's very charming. So to be charming, you're not very blunt. I'm very blunt, and people don't think I'm charming at all. So I'm sorry, but this doesn't make any sense to me either. This whole thing is just, it's like, again, creepy Stepford Wives thing. Like I said in my last video, I think it was Stepford Wife type vibe. It's like, just, are we living in reality anymore?
My childhood was, for the most part, it was full of love, it was full of laughter and adventure.
Tell us a story, Grace Tame.
One fine day in the middle of the night, two dead men got out to fight.
I threw myself at life with every fibre of my tiny but mighty being.
So just ignore that one.
You know, there was nothing I didn't have a good crack at.
One fine day in the middle of the night, the sea caught alight.
I was the only girl on my primary school soccer team from grade 3 to 6. I was also a very keen, albeit shithouse ballroom dancer. I love school, I love to learn.
She seems very autistic to you, doesn't she? I mean, she seems just like a normal little kid, everything that she's doing here.
You know, I had a mind like a sponge.
Grace's father and I split when she was about 2 years old. We've always remained on good terms.
When we were growing up, it just became the norm for her to live half the time at her dad's and half at her mum's.
We know now that she was particularly vulnerable to being sexually abused.
When I was 6 years old...
You knew that now. Why do you know that now? My parents made sure that didn't happen to me, fortunately. It was one thing I can thank them for. Because I'm pretty sure there were men that wanted to do that to me when I was a little boy. My parents made sure that that didn't happen.
I was abused by an older child who asked me to get undressed in a closet before molesting me. And that was an experience that, as a 6-year-old, you know, I didn't have the context to understand.
Grace was targeted for bullying in high school. It was an all-girls school. I think she struggled socially, not picking up on these social cues. And that contributed to her developing anorexia.
Anorexia has plagued me most of my life, you know, since I was 12.
Grace was 14 years old when she was first hospitalised with anorexia nervosa, and she relapsed a year later.
In April 2010, because I was relapsing, my parents took me to the doctor again. So I went to the doctor's appointment, and then I came back to campus only to discover that the rest of my year 10 classmates were on this excursion that I'd completely forgotten about. And so I was walking around aimlessly in the courtyard. And that's when this teacher, this senior teacher, spotted me. He asked me to go into his office to have a chat. I thought nothing odd of it. You know, I sat in his office and he asked me questions about the illness. He wasn't arguing with me. He was telling me everything that I wanted to hear. That subtle process of gradually undermining my genuine support network started from that moment.
When I picked her up that afternoon, Grace told me she had spent a lot of the day in the office of a teacher. I found that disturbing. By the end of the week, he had given her a key to his office, and he was getting her to stay in his office for long periods of time. So I had requested a meeting with the principal at the school.
So, why is Grace going along with this? That's a legitimate question that I have. I don't understand why you would see this as an opportunity that was fitting you, unless you were gaining something from it.
In the grooming phase, before this pedophile actually introduced the sexual abuse, I disclosed to him my experience of being molested as a 6-year-old. Now, months later, when the pedophile actually did introduce the sexual abuse of me, he did so by recreating my childhood trauma. He led me to a well-hidden storeroom, and without hesitating, he asked me to go into the closet and take off my clothes.
It's a different story than what Mr. Bester tells. From what I can determine, it was not a closet. When she might have been in a closet, but he was not in there with her. So there's discrepancies there, and I wish that she would have said, given more details.
Didn't know when the abuse started. We just knew that Grace's behaviour was becoming more and more erratic. She started self-harming. She started disappearing from the house at night sometimes.
So she's sneaking around. It just seems all really weird to me. It doesn't seem like it's all on the up and up.
Fear of abandonment. So I became fixated on the attention that he gave me. Now, when this attention elevated to sexual abuse, I still had the compulsion to be in his presence. If he would pull back, then I would think that to get his attention, I needed to do something, sexual, because that's what he liked. Confusion doesn't even cut it. It's the closest thing that I can imagine would be like being possessed. It is, in a way, a form of possession that is designed by the perpetrator. April 2011, that's the turning point. My crippling fear of this man was replaced by a different fear. He had told me about another girl, and I was terrified by the thought of there being others.
You weren't terrified by the thought of his wife, though. This is a married man. Mr. Bester, at the time he was married. Supposedly his relationship with his wife has ended because of this affair. But it ruined his life, really. What he did. He went to prison, he lost his job, lost his wife. And that's probably what should have happened to him for doing this, but at the same time, let's see the other side of the coin, what has happened with Grace Tame. She's been nominated Australia's Person of the Year, and there's more to the story. Let's take a look and see.
I told the school principal what had happened, and shortly after that conversation...
By the way, the way she's running here is, just want to point this out. Maybe those of you who are really excellent runners could tell me. I am, as I've said many times, a former personal trainer. I've done a lot of stuff. She's running incorrectly. She's running heel toe. You don't run heel. You don't slam your heels into the ground. That's bad for your joints all the way up to your shoulders. So you run on your balls of your feet. That's what you're supposed to run. But she actually set a record for in a marathon running like this. So more power to her, but she's probably going to have knee and back problems when she's older.
The police were called to the school.
59-year-old Nicholas Ockett-Bester was a senior science teacher at the private girls' school when he
was charged with maintaining a sexual relationship with a person under the age of 17. The word relationship has connotations of consent, and naturally the media's interpretation of it was that it was an affair, some kind of sordid affair. I thought everyone thought that it was my fault. The shame and the blame was all mine.
Grace wasn't allowed to tell her story, tell her side of everything. They only heard his.
Bester told police he felt pity for the girl who was suffering from an eating disorder, and this had clouded his judgment.
Grace eventually did go back to school, which was incredibly difficult.
Girls that she went to school with would say awful things about her. She was asking for it, that she was, that she was a slut.
She eventually did move schools, which I think helped, but it was going to be with her everywhere she went.
Grace needed a lot of help. She was dabbling in drugs. She needed to get out of Hobart.
6 months after graduating, I flew to the United States. I had one friend in a place called Santa Barbara, which is 90 minutes north of Los Angeles. And I enrolled at a community college there and studied for a couple of years.
She was able to explore and grow as a person because of that anonymity that she had over there. So that was really positive. But the thing about trauma is that it comes out in so many other ways that are toxic, partying, drinking, being involved in that sort of Hollywood lifestyle.
I didn't have any boundaries because mine had been completely eroded. And What I had been groomed to tolerate was also what I had been groomed to expect.
So this doesn't make any sense to me. When she was in the United States, something that nobody talks about is she got married. Grace Tame is actually married to an American actor, Spencer Breslin, who is worth $5 million. Huh. So the story thickens then, because what is acting? Well, you might want to say it's a way of expressing yourself, but it's also a way of getting attention. Huh. What is this here? She wanted to be an actress, maybe? Do you think that's why she got involved with this actor? Why she went to Santa Barbara City College and studied acting, I believe, as I recall. She studied acting there and art. Well, if you're going to be a professional visual artist, odds are you're not going to be making very much money. You can make really good money as a visual artist, don't get me wrong. I do all right. Not great by any means, but I do all right. But if she marries this accomplished actor, well, hey, she can sit around making visual art all day long. And maybe she'll even get notoriety that way. Maybe she'll be able to get into some movies because he's already in movies. And she'll get some attention. She says that her boundaries have been eroded. Really? Over the course of less than 1 year? Your boundaries are completely torn from you. I thought you had a close-knit family. They didn't teach you to have good boundaries? It's ridiculous.
Abuse was familiar to me. And in the US, I found myself in more abusive relationships.
The first time I met Grace, it was actually over Skype, and she was in LA. I was doing a lot of reporting on sexual assault within university spaces.
It's surreal. It's so surreal. I can't believe it.
Once Grace and Nina developed their relationship,
It's like reading Grace.
I think that they realised the value in Grace's story and Grace speaking out.
I'm excited about the potential to positively impact their lives.
But the block in the way was Grace not being able to speak out under her own name.
Because of this bizarre law in Tasmania, I couldn't name Grace, and if I did name Grace, not only could I be prosecuted as the journalist, but horrendously, she could be prosecuted as well. That's when I came up with the idea for a campaign, and I called it Let Her Speak. The campaign grew, and we ended up taking 17 individual cases to court. And last year we managed to overturn the law itself.
April 2019, I was granted a special exemption to share my story. It meant that I had my voice back after all this time of watching other people, including the perpetrator of the abuse against me, talk about my experience and change the narrative.
I lost my children, I lost my job.
So that's it. What gets you to be Person of the Year in Australia? Did she invent some new medical procedures that are saving lives, saving money? Did she invent some sort of engineering advancement that increases gas mileage? Was she an accomplished athlete who won gold medals at the Olympics? Did she write some amazing books or produce some amazing documentaries? Nope. She changed one law that was probably on the books to protect victims and perpetrators. Now, I think that from what it sounds like, the law is such that the perpetrators of these crimes are allowed to tell their story, but the victims are not. And I think that's wrong. If, what's good for one is good for the other. You shouldn't be allowed to talk about it if you're the perpetrator or the victim. Because it's not right. But I think the reason that this law was in place was probably to protect the innocent, because Mr. Bester here was found guilty, and he was sentenced to about 2.5 years, 2 years and 8 months, I think, in prison, which is nothing compared to what he would have gotten in the United States. We have a saying in the United States, 15 will get you 20. It means if you chase after these 15-year-olds, then you're going to get 20 years in prison. So, he probably deserves a much harsher sentence than he got. But you don't want people coming after these individuals necessarily and harming them. But at the same time, if the perpetrator is allowed to speak out, then we know who he is and what he did, supposedly. So I don't know why they would have a weird law like that. But that's what she did. That was what her big accomplishment was, is to get this law changed so she could talk about this time of her life when she was a teenager. I find that to be rather lacking. Let's continue on and see what else this video has to say.
I had my power back.
Grace was still over in America while all this was playing out. And when we won Grace that exemption, she just wanted to be on the next flight out to Australia.
By the way, in case you're curious, this intersection is in Los Angeles. I recognize it.
It meant that I could fully lend myself and my story to the greater cause.
Exhale, press the mat away. Inhale, arms forward.
Coming home can also be a really hard thing for a sexual abuse survivor, particularly in a small place like Hobart where everybody knows who you are.
Inhale, reach up, and then exhale, bend.
Grace was re-establishing herself, working part-time as a yoga instructor.
She was just sort of settling back home, and all of a sudden this guy came on the scene, and she was like, oh, I've met this guy, and you know, he's a runner as well.
We have had a very long day, so my brain cells are really hot at the moment.
We started talking and we decided to go on a date.
That is smug. It's more of a smug dishwasher than a smeg dishwasher.
All right. So this is the final part of this whole puzzle here. This is Max, her boyfriend, her live-in boyfriend. She's still married to Spencer Breslin in the United States. I imagine he knows that she's still married, and maybe that's why he hasn't proposed to her. Another weird thing about this is, like, how do you face the rest of the world going, yeah, my girlfriend, she was abused as a teenager, and that's what she's known for. Oh, okay. And if it's even worse than that, it could be that, oh no, she had this inappropriate affair as a teenager, and that's what she's known for. Wow, that would be. How do you explain that? I mean, how do you go on and just, yeah, what's your girlfriend's story? What's she do? What she's all about? She gets Person of the Year, you know, and she won this big prestigious honor, the Person of the Year, in Australia. Yet we don't know for sure if she was a willing participant or not. I mean, I wasn't there, so I can't. The law says, hey, you do it whether she's a willing participant or not. You're a perpetrator, you get punished, and he probably should be punished. I'm not saying that he should just be left to walk the streets, especially considering he had inappropriate images of children on his computer. So there's something going on with Mr. Bester that he needed to be punished for, and I think that 2.5 years was nowhere near long enough for that sort of thing. But at the same time, Grace Tame, it's like, I don't think you deserve this much of an honor. Look, that's abuse, assault. These things are horrifying, and it needs to stop. I 100% agree with that. Should never happen. But I don't think you're going to stop it, and I don't think that Grace's approach to the problem is about stopping it. It's about giving her attention. She wants this attention. She wants all eyes on her. You look at this, and it's just all about, look at her. Focus on her, 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 instead of focus on what she's doing. And one last thing I want to end on before we get out of here. Grace Tame talks about, being the oppressed. How oppressed are you? She's worth somewhere between $1 and $5 million. But you're oppressed because you were abused as a teenager. You're oppressed because you're female. You're oppressed because whatever reason. I found that I can be overly emotional. And there have been instances in my life in more recent years when I've been in situations where I felt like I was being disregarded or disrespected in some way. And those situations have been recorded, and I've gone back and looked at the recordings, and I was like, wow, I was emotionalizing that situation way more than it warranted. That's what can happen when you allow your emotions to kind of guide you, kind of like what one of the genders on this planet does. That one gender that makes up like 50% of the population and has all the babies. So I'm curious about what really went on in her brain throughout this entire experience from the time she was 15 until today. To be able to match that up to reality and just to see what's really going on there. I have a feeling this is a very disturbed 26, maybe she's 27 now. Her birthday is in December, so I don't know exactly the day, but I think she's just a very disturbed person, and she's likable, she's well liked, and so she has a good support system around her of people who care about her and want to be around her in a positive way, and that's keeping her from doing anything terrible. But I don't think that she deserves this Person of the Year award. And I hope that if you're watching this, Australia, thank you for coming by. I do appreciate everybody stopping by my channel. Those of you who are fans in the United States and other countries, I appreciate all of you. There you go. That's me begging for the attention I get from you. Keep watching my videos. Please make sure that you like, comment, share, subscribe. Make sure that you're still subscribed because YouTube does unsubscribe people every single day. And I will catch you all in the next one.